We hear often of people who reach out to us who are in marriages where they feel intensely lonely. And they might have a husband or a wife and kids, but they feel intensely alone. And that can really devastate someone. One of the answers that people need to know about and often neglect is the beauty and the power of the local church.
Even though we go to a very big church, it quickly becomes small because of the community and the way that they foster relationships within the church.
What's going on, guys? Ginger and Jeremy here for another episode of the Ginger and Jeremy podcast. And last episode, we brought up the possibility of me writing a song to introduce this podcast.
Oh, yeah. Have you done it?
Nope, haven't done it.
Oh,
so
bummer.
So keep listening and maybe it'll happen one day. How you doing?
Good.
Good.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic.
What are we talking about today? Because I don't know.
Yeah, so that's right. I did tell Ginger that I wasn't going to tell her what the topic is. And actually, for no particular reason, it's not anything, I just thought, as we sat down, I had another topic prepared that we had talked about, but this one, I think this is a good topic. And here's why it hit me, is because over the years, social media is an interesting place. And we, just for various reasons, whether it was a book you wrote or we wrote or something I've posted on scripture or whatever, we get a lot of questions. Mm-hmm. And we get a lot of spiritual questions about the Bible, questions about wisdom in life. What should I do if? And one of the common denominators that I've seen in so many lives that have reached out to us, who otherwise we would have never crossed paths with if not for social media, is the issue of loneliness. And it really is true. There's a lot of loneliness in this world. And not just, I live in the boondocks of Arkansas and my nearest Walmart is 3 hours away loneliness. Well,
if you live in Arkansas, your Walmart's going to be 3 minutes away, almost no matter where you live, right?
1,000% true.
Continue.
Because it's the home of Sam Walton. Bad illustration.
Sorry.
But you know what I mean? Not the kind of like, I live in Alaska.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Okay. I know a girl who lives, so Canada, the Canadian border, most of Canada is on the border of US because they love their bigger brother. Just kidding. But a lot of Canada is on the border. And then there's Edmonton, which I've been to several times, which is maybe 6 or 7, hours north. And it's one of the more northern Canadian cities. And we know a girl, Ruth, who is, I think, like 10 or 12 hours even more north than Edmonton. And that's in the middle of nowhere. They're literally getting to places by dogs and sleds. It's true. Ask her. So not that kind of loneliness, but the kind of loneliness that could describe someone who might be surrounded by people, but feels alone and isolated. Mm-hmm. And there's so much. It's a epidemic of loneliness in our world. And my heart goes out to people who are struggling with loneliness. I know yours does too. And there are real answers. And one of the answers that people need to know about and often neglect is the beauty and the power of the local church.
Yeah.
As a source of life and strength and community. And so often my answer in response to people in their questions when it surrounds loneliness is, where do you live and what good biblical local church is there that you could get plugged into? But I want to talk about that. I want to talk about loneliness. I want to talk about the benefits of the local church, of being connected in a community of people who love you and care for you and aren't judging you based off of your socioeconomic status. And I know you've got a lot to say on that and to share. So I thought I could spring it on you, no problem.
Let's go.
So we've traveled a good bit, And everywhere we've gone, we've gotten involved in local churches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have. It's been really cool to be a part of churches that are just so close knit. And I feel like even though we go to a very big church, it quickly becomes small because of the community and the way that they foster relationships within the church. Mm-hmm. And so you'll be a part of a Bible study. And then it's like you're a part of a fellowship group actually first. And then inside that fellowship group, which could have 600 people, then you'll break it down into like a Bible study.
Yeah.
And then the Bible study breaks down into small groups. And so I feel like no matter where you turn, you're having community and fellowship.
Yeah.
And then even beyond that, like, I think getting connected, if you're, like families, just having other families over from your church can be helpful too, to like get to know people in your community. Yeah. And there's so many ways that we can reach out to others who are lonely. And also in the process of doing that, if we're lonely ourselves, then that also is a way that we are ministered to at the same time. And so I think that I remember even hearing you talk about it, like you were talking about being in a place where you were single and you were lonely because of that, right? Mm-hmm. So if you want to talk about that too, because I think I went from a place of like being with so many people around all the time that I don't remember feeling lonely when I was single, right?
Yeah.
But it was different for you.
In a connected world where you were understood and known,
right,
and familiar. Mm-hmm. And for me, the loneliness I've experienced, because I've always been a social kind of extroverted person. Mm. The loneliness I experienced was just feeling, okay, I don't have my life partner. I don't want to do this alone. I think it was God who said, it's not good that man be alone. Was that God who said that? So from the start of creation, we know when we were designed for community.
Yeah.
And I felt that acutely, especially when I entered ministry and I was doing so much pouring out and I was doing different counseling and ministering to people. And I just remember thinking, man, I do not want to do this alone. I don't want to do life alone. And I was surrounded by people, but I didn't have my life partner. Mm. And so there were times where that loneliness felt like a dark cloud. Mm. Even at times where I felt like if I had a knife, I could cut this loneliness. It just felt so real. I remember sometimes it would hit me on Monday mornings because my whole week as a pastor leads up to Sunday and you're doing so much output. And then Monday's your day off and you kind of sleep in and it's a bit of a lull. And I would get hit with these bouts of loneliness where I just would be thinking, man, I don't want to do this alone. I want my life partner, but finding your life partner isn't something you can just go out and snap your fingers and do. Yeah, you kind of have to wait on the Lord and trust him. And
I wonder, it's funny, like I was thinking about this too. Probably another side of that is like as a single pastor, then you think about this, like you're pouring out. And then even if you did want to hang out with somebody, it's on Monday. So their week is just starting. They're back to work. And so they're working at Chick-fil-A and you're like, okay, I guess I can't hang out with them today.
Well, I'd go to Chick-fil-A and hang out with people.
You would. You'd hang out anyways. But it still is like, they don't have, it's not a weekend. So you're not going to just go hang out with them.
It's a peculiar position to be in.
Yeah, for sure.
But I really felt like you were, another aspect of my loneliness is I did a lot of fun things traveling the world, but I always felt like, man, I just wish my life partner was with me so I could share it with you,
Yeah, yeah.
And so, but there's all sorts of reasons for loneliness. I think people feel misunderstood. They feel like they're not being heard. They're not being cared for. We hear often of people who reach out to us who are in marriages where they feel intensely lonely. And they might have a husband or a wife and kids, but they feel intensely alone. And that can really devastate someone.
Yeah, for sure. Because that's the place where you want to be able to come back. Like if you've been out, doing your normal life stuff, working, whatever, you come back to that place and that's where you want to be the most relaxed, connected and all of that. And if that's not there,
Yeah.
that has to be so, so tough. And I think just even looking at, like, for me, I was just thinking about, like you said, you mentioned a little minute ago about social media. I feel like in the world we're in today too, there can be a point of, like, even we'll be so connected and we're talking and stuff, but then if we scroll on our phone, it's like, wait, we're not spending this time together. And there's that aspect of loneliness, or a false sense of, like, friendship that you can feel like you have. And then you feel like, oh, I'm friends with these people. Or maybe I messaged somebody on Instagram and I feel like I'm connected to them, or texted somebody, but then it's like, it's not the same as having an actual conversation with somebody.
Right.
So you can scroll, see what everybody's up to in their life, and you're like, okay, I feel like I'm connecting with my friends on social media by doing that. But then at the end of the day, it's like, no, I'm just, like, you can feel that loneliness of, like, this is not true friendship. Like, I want to be in their life. I want to know them, and connect with people in a more, like, tangible way, you know?
And social media is a phenomenon where we've never been more connected, and yet never more disconnected in a way, or never been more accessible, but never more lonely, because it does give you with all of the connectivity that comes from it. It also can isolate you, because you start immediately entering into the sense of being judged, because you're comparing yourself to the life of everyone you're watching on social media. And you feel like you don't measure up. You feel like you're inadequate. You feel like you're not as accomplished, or you're not as attractive, or you're not as intelligent, or you're not as popular. And so even though you're logging onto your social media app and you've got 2,000 friends on this platform, the more time you delve into that world, the more isolated you start to become, and the more isolated and alone you start to feel, because of everything you're not and everything you don't have. And so as you look at, especially young people who are growing up and they're learning how to engage the world and engage relationship, and they're in a constant downward spiral of comparison and trying to measure up because of the social media, the fake social media profiles. And I don't just mean like Russian bots. I mean, to a degree, so much of what's on social media is fake, because it's not holistic life. It's one small sliver of life that's being presented. And that drives people into loneliness, because it can drive them into shame, and it can drive them into despair, and it can drive them. Yeah, discontentment.
Yeah, and I think just that is true. The constant comparison's always there, and just even more so now. And it's like, like you think about for our own kids growing up in this age, like, what are we going to do? Like, how are you going to help them to see that, okay, these things can be tools, but they also can be very damaging to how you're viewing relationships.
Right. How do we use social media specifically in a strategic way, in a way that will redeem that platform as, well, you said it really well, as a tool in our hands, not something driving us or controlling us. And so as we think about loneliness and the despondency and despair, I mean, it really is a real epidemic that can drive people insane. If you feel like you don't have an outlet to speak to someone who truly knows you, who truly understands you, who truly cares about you, that can leave you in a desperate place.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I remember feeling that way for quite some time. It was interesting because after we were married, you and I would talk about everything, and we were just so on the same page. And that was it's such a gift to have that in marriage. And I feel like there was so much there that I was like so content in. And at the same time, I was like longing to have a relationship with a couple other women who I could just like talk to and share hard things I was going through, or fears I was having, or things that were coming up in my mind. I would just think like, oh, it'd be so nice to like have a friend to like go out to coffee with. But I was terrified of that.
And you talk about that in your upcoming book, People Pleaser.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And what was driving some of your loneliness was
comparison, fear of man, like being afraid of what these people would think about me. And I really had that imaginary expectation where I thought they have this expectation of who they want me to be.
Right.
And I'm not measuring up. And so I don't want to show them my flaws if I feel like, man, maybe I don't have the right words to say today, or I feel uncomfortable in my own skin, so I don't want to go out to coffee with them. And so it really isolated me. I isolated myself because I was choosing to live in that place where I was lonely, in a sense of like not having deeper, genuine friendships, even outside of just the two of us.
Right.
And I was so guarding myself and trying to protect myself from being vulnerable or being hurt.
Right.
And that just left me in that place of loneliness.
And it's easy to look at this from some measure of objectivity, sitting here on a couch doing a podcast and say, well, just reach out to someone and just go be vulnerable. But if somebody's listening to this right now who's experienced what you and I have experienced to a lesser degree, a greater degree, or whatever, or maybe this has been largely their life experience, it's not as simple as just saying, well, just go reach out to someone. Just there are real battles being fought in the mind and the soul where you do feel enslaved to fear, or you feel enslaved to comparison, or you feel condemned. It's not just something where you're like, I think I feel a little condemned. No, it's this overwhelming sense of I don't measure up, and I can't be loved, and I shouldn't be loved, and I'm not loved. And it drives you to a place, a dangerous place of isolation. And there's 1,000 other demonstrations or manifestations is the word I was thinking of for that, where somebody's experience of loneliness could be driven by 100 different things, but it's very real. It feels real, and it feels like you can't get out. It doesn't help for someone to come along and just say, well, you need to reach out to someone, or
Right. Because I think a lot of it, like you said, I feel like for me, a lot of it is just like in my mind of somebody that maybe I feel like they have it more together than me. Somebody who doesn't, I may not feel as intimidated by them.
Sure.
And I might actually be like, oh yeah, come on over, hang out. Like, and then somebody who I feel like they have everything together, their life looks perfect in my understanding, then I'll be more hesitant to like invite them over if my house is slightly messy, or if I feel like I just am having an off day.
And those are those imaginary expectations you write about in your book.
Yes.
Is they haven't imposed those expectations, but you're imagining they have those expectations. And so I guess thinking about this loneliness, I think it does come down, well, there are solutions, and it does come down a lot of it to right thinking. But when we imbibe lies or deceptions that we tell ourselves, it really does have an impact on how we function in this world, and how we view this world, how we view others. And the results of that, the effects of that are devastating.
Yeah, because you're not only are you cutting off that relationship, you're going to be more lonely, but also that other person's you're not able to love them and serve them because you're so consumed with yourself that you cannot get your eyes off of yourself long enough to even help somebody. And I feel like that happened to me just the other day. I was thinking about this friend who recently had a surgery, and I was like, oh, I should take her a meal. And then I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to cook. I feel like I've not been cooking good meals recently. What would I even take her? And it's just like, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is like, I need to impress her with my cooking. Well, I can always just go pick up Chipotle if that's what I'm worried about. Just pick up something that she'll have food to eat. Like, just give her a meal, take her something, show her that you love her and care for her. And that's like my knee-jerk reaction often is like, oh no, if I have this person over, if I do this for them, what about me? But I think at the end of the day, it's like that thought needs to stop there and think like, how can I love and serve this person? Who cares what they think about my cooking? I'm not going to try to serve them some rubbish meal, but at the same time, I want to love and serve them the best I can with what I've been given.
Right. So what is if you were to diagnose loneliness, it's difficult, isn't it? But there's a lot of things that can drive us toward loneliness. It's not just one thing.
Yeah, I think like there's so much. I mean, I just think about there are those who have been married for so many years and their spouse dies, and they're lonely in a different way because that's all they've known is like having somebody there and then that person's gone. Or you'll have loneliness because you're single, or there's loneliness because maybe you moved to a new place and you're just trying to build friendships. Like there are so many reasons why we can be lonely. And
sorry.
No, it's good. Go.
Well, you just made me think of maybe a major underlying reason, and it's the highly individualistic world we live in, where we in the Western world are so crazy individual focused that even other societies and civilizations for thousands of years were built around community. And you did not grow up and at 18 years old go to college 30 hours away in another completely different culture and space and time, and then get a degree and then move to Hawaii when your family's in Idaho, and then raise a family. Like that just didn't happen. You were born and raised in your community. Even if you think about the ancient Near East, like the time much of the scriptures were written, you think about like the parable of the prodigal sons, and the younger son asks his father for his inheritance. Well, his inheritance was the land they lived on. And so that inheritance would have come to him. He would have possessed a third of that land when his father died. That was the inheritance. And so he was asking his father to basically be dead, sell his land to give it to him and move away. But it was so unnatural for that, because you wouldn't just take your stuff and move away. But we've built an entire culture around taking your stuff as a kid and moving away. And
all the aspirations. I think there's so much that is driving people away from, wherever you grew up, because we have so many capabilities to be able to do that now.
Yes.
And there are jobs you're getting a higher education, so you're going to move away for that. There's so many aspirations, and everybody's working towards all these goals as they were many years ago and throughout history. Right. Yeah. But I feel like in this modern age, there's so many more things that you can use. You take planes across the world, whereas, years ago you didn't have that. And so, it's just changed everything.
It's in like the plane, this incredible invention that has in some measure saved civilization to a degree where we can go to a starving country and deliver food from a prospering place to a non-prospering place. Say, hey, we have food here, you don't have food there, we can deliver that. Or we can go to the heart of a typhoon devastated island and bring relief because of airplanes. We can travel through air. That's incredible, and that enhances the human experience. But then we can take those same planes and fly them into the Twin Towers. And so with the great advancements that advance human flourishing, we can take those same technological advancements and destroy human flourishing. And so we see the upsides and the downsides of our technological advancement, right?
Yeah.
With our phones, we can communicate in a way where, think of the probably millions of lives that have been saved because of the communication of the telephone.
Or with your phone, you cannot communicate to the person sitting next to you because you're just on it all the time.
Sheesh, spitting bars. No, that's true though. It's so true. So we see its positive influence and its detriment. And that's anything in life. But I really think in the Western world, it has contributed to the loneliness where we are so connected, where we have headlines in an instant. If a bomb drops in the Middle East, 30 seconds later, we know about it. That's never been the case. And we have not only one social media platform like Facebook, you have Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram and TikTok and whatever else there is.
The young kids
YouTube.
are doing.
Yeah. Whatever our fellow young people are doing. And
Fellow.
all these, hey, don't laugh at fellow. We're young people.
Are we?
Yeah, kind of.
We're both in our 30s.
Okay. Well, when you put it like that,
All
it's
right.
a little harsh.
Continue.
But we are so connected, and yet, ride a subway and look around and everybody's on their phones, disconnected. And then what are they connected to? It's not always the best decisions, right? So it's things that are isolating them and driving them toward despair. Okay, so as we think about the problem, the solution is actually really beautiful and simple. If you are feeling isolated and alone in the dog-eat-dog world that we live in, whether it's in your family, your social circles, or your lack of social circles, or your business, your career, whatever it is, there is an answer. And this is what I want to spend maybe some time on now, is the Bible uncovers that answer beautifully, just in the format in which it was written, which is two communities. Not dos communities, but two, T-O. The Bible was written to communities. It wasn't just written to an individual here or there. And yet that's how we read it. Mm-hmm. When we read our Bible, we are a product of our individualized Western world where, and you can test this, if you're listening to this, you can test yourself. The first thought you have when you read the Bible is, what does this mean for me as an isolated individual? And so you're reading a book like the book of Ephesians, which we're about to study in the college ministry. I just opened the other night, Ephesians chapter 1. And the opening verse is to the saints in Ephesus, not to the saint. It's written to a community. And so God has designed us to flourish in community. And the way he designs that community is through church. Like people coming together in a world of love to know one another and love one another, serve one another. And that's what church is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's been really cool. Like just getting connected at our church. I've noticed that like whenever I first got there, it was a little overwhelming just seeing how many people were there. But, now we have like core groups of friends and people that we hang out with, people that we're pouring into and being encouraged by, being challenged by. Like it is such a sweet gift, and it is very fulfilling to like be around that, to be able to serve in those ways. But then also when you're serving, it's just filling you up again. And I feel like that loneliness starts to subside because you realize like, wow, this is so amazing how we shouldn't even be here all together. Like, how are we all here? Right. Like there's nothing that would bring us together in the natural world out there. Like we don't have the same interests, hobbies, work, anything, but we're all coming together for one purpose: to learn more about Christ and his word, to love and pour out that love to others around us, to the world around us. And so I think that commonality, that goal it really unites you, and there is purpose and fulfillment even in those things that it takes out the loneliness. But ultimately a relationship with Christ is where it all starts, because without that you will be lonely. You will be only worldly things can feel like they're filling that void for so long. And then you will be left disheartened, broken, and all of that. And so I think that's where it all begins.
Yeah. It doesn't it sound nice and this I think is what everybody wants. Wouldn't it sound nice for you as a person to be embraced and accepted, not on the basis or the merits of how much money is in your bank account, how symmetrical your face is, how much you do or don't impress others with your gifts and your talents, not on all of the metrics that we give each other in this dog-eat-dog world. Your performance, which can vary from day to day. I remember one of my first years playing professional soccer, and it just dawned on me. You go, what's that cliche, from hero to zero overnight. One bad game. In the professional sports world.
Especially as a goalkeeper.
You're loved or hated, and it can change like that. I mean, it's in a moment. And you realize, okay, that's true in the sports world, how fickle fans are, or coaches, or teammates, or performances. But that really extends across all of life. In this dog-eat-dog world, you're it for a moment, and then you're forgotten the next. You're in, then you're out. You're accepted, then you're not. And it's so often based on such superficial realities. And what the gospel is Jesus Christ looking at people and saying, I'm not accepting you on the basis of what you've done. I'm not accepting you on the basis of how great you've been. I'm accepting you on the basis of who I am, my perfections, my accomplishments, and I will give to you the righteousness I've earned, and I'll take from you all of the judgment you've earned. We'll swap places. That's the gospel. That's the cross. On the cross, Jesus was swapping places with sinners. And then he adopts you into his family and says, welcome, you're a member of the family, still not based on anything you've done or haven't done, on how beautiful or not beautiful you are, on anything of your accomplishments. You are adopted in this family based on what I have done. So if you think of Christ is accepting us and loving us, not on the basis of who we are, and then he welcomes us into this world of love, which is the church. And it's full of sinners like us. So we can't expect we're going to be treated perfectly the way Christ treats us, because we are still sinners, but we're redeemed sinners. But I want to read, I go to this text often because, again, I'm thinking of the person who is lonely. And as they hear these words, this is from 1 John chapter 4, which is describing the church and describes it as this place of love. And just to imagine, okay, if I'm a lonely person battling the darkness of loneliness, where can I go for help? And then to hear these words and to think, that's where I can go. Listen to this. This is 1 John 4:7. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. In this, the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent his only Son into the world, so that we might live through him. In this is love, not that we have loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God. If we love one another, God abides in us, and his love is perfected in us. By this we know that we abide in him, and he in us, because he has given us of his Spirit. And we have seen and testified that the Father has sent his Son to be the Savior of the world. Whoever confesses that Jesus is the Son of God, God abides in him, and he in God. So we have come to know and to believe that the love that God has for us, God is love. And whoever abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. By this is love perfected with us, so that we may have confidence for the day of judgment. Because as he is, so also are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. We love because he first loved us. If anyone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he is a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen, cannot love God whom he has not seen. And this commandment we have from him, whoever loves God must also love his brother. Everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has been born of God, and everyone who loves the Father loves whoever has been born of him. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and obey his commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. For everyone who has been born of God overcomes the world. And this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. So over and over, this place of unity and community is described as a place of love, where if we don't love one another the way Christ has loved us, it's actually antithetical to our very claim to be Christians. And so in speaking to people who are struggling with loneliness, my first piece of advice is come and enter a world of love where you're treated not based on your socioeconomic status and climbing the social ladder, but you are loved because we've been loved.
Yeah, it's so refreshing to just be reminded of that, because I feel like like we said, in the world that we're in today, there's so much comparison and so much like position and all of those things. But just that reminder that before God and in the church, it should not be that way. Sometimes people will do that, and there will be churches who will not handle all of that well. But when you see it done in a way that is not just bringing in the most popular person, putting them on the front row and like, we're going to put you here because you have all the money. Yeah. It's like, no, you have, like, I remember this church that we went to in Little Rock, the Friendly Chapel. And it was the sweetest thing because they had such an awesome ministry. They had ministry to those who had disabilities, all of those things. And they would bring them in and they would sit in the front row, and they would like, they got the front row of the church. And then you had all these people, there were homeless people. You had people who would come from the soup kitchen, and it was like all different types of people coming together to love God, to worship him. And then you had people who were like, you know, in politics, who were like a big deal in that space. Right. And it was like, well, they were just there alongside
it's the great
other
equalizer.
person, because in church, like, it should not be, you should not have this like position, like, oh, this person's, you know, famous, or they're wealthy, or they're well known, I'm going to put them here in the front. Right. Like, that's just not how it should be.
Yeah. Because the blood of Christ is the great equalizer of man. It's not given or taken based on your accomplishments. And in the church, we love one another based solely on the love we've received from Christ, which is not conditioned on us and our performance. It's actually in spite of us. And so the love we give to others is a supernatural love given in spite of. And so I would tell the person battling loneliness, for whatever reason, because there could be 1,000 reasons, but so many of them are, I'll be judged, I'm not accepted, I'm not loved, I'm not seen, I'm not valued. And they start to believe those lies. I would urge them, well, look at the love and the acceptance and the value that Christ is giving out freely. And then he's inviting you into a place where that is the pattern of life for these Christians. Now, so many people have genuinely been hurt by churches, and that's devastating. But the only reason that's devastating is because churches aren't supposed to be like that. If you got hurt in a professional sports club because you weren't accepted, because you didn't measure up, nobody's surprised by that. They go, well, you didn't measure up, dude. You're out. You're not good enough. The only reason people are surprised by being hurt in churches is because that's not what church is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a place of love and embracing people and accepting people the way Christ has accepted us. Now, that doesn't mean accepting sin and rebellion to God. I mean, in that text in 1 John 4, he's saying, no, this is a world of love, and love for the Christian begins with loving God. And how do you define that? Well, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments, Jesus said. Loving God is demonstrated in our obedience. So it means dying to self, dying to our sin, and then entering a world of others who've died to self and are not pursuing their own lusts and delights in this world, but are rather pursuing obedience to God and love of God, which results in love for one another. And so, goodness, the church, as imperfect as it is this side of heaven, is a place for the lonely. It's a place for the downtrodden. It's a place for the rejected. It's a place for those who've been chewed up and spit out by this cruel and demanding world. and it's a place for them to find refuge, peace. Every year, our church puts on a huge conference for pastors, and they have thousands of pastors come. And one of the things that really is special about it is we have over 900 volunteers every spring from the church.
It's pretty incredible.
And you'll see, we have a little section. We intentionally go over the top for these pastors. We want them to be served hand and foot, because pastors are serving others all the time. So we have like a little shoe shine station, and guys can come and get their shoes shined. And what's always remarkable is to see who's shining their shoes. And you might have a federal judge, or you might have a wealthy businessman, or a Disney exec.
It's going to make me tear up, and I don't know why.
But there's a beauty to it.
Yeah, it is that, because it's like, you don't want to have this position where you've seen so many abuse their powers, and even in position or in the church, it's like, no, we're all the same at the foot of the cross, and it's so beautiful. And now I'm crying.
But it is beautiful.
Yeah.
And my heart breaks for those who struggle with loneliness.
Yeah, for sure.
And our counsel is run to a place of refuge and find a church that is genuinely a place of refuge. Don't find a church that is operating the same way the world does, based on the metrics of the world. What can you do for us? How important are you? How wealthy are you? Don't find a church that's operating, because it's no different than the world.
Right.
Find a supernatural church, a church that isn't operating on the same wavelength as this dog-eat-dog world, and find refuge there for your soul.
That's good.
Well, I hope that's an encouragement. I sprung that one on you.
That was good, though. I think it was a good topic.
You have good insights, love.
Oh, you do, babe.
I really hope people will find, and if you can, reach out to us. I don't know if we can always find a church for you, but we'll try.
Yeah.
Shoot us a message or something. And we'll be back soon with another episode.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for hanging out, guys. Like, subscribe, leave us a review. That always helps.
Yes, please do.
And look, again, we took your advice with the mic stands and with the seating. Look at us. So if you got any input, or if you've got any topics, these last few episodes, we did an episode on, this one on loneliness. That's come from a lot of messages about that. We did an episode on our first year of marriage. That was directly a result of someone asking a question about that. And then we did an episode on loving one another as Christ loved the church. And that was a question as well. So send in your questions. We scan the comments. We look at the reviews. And so we'd appreciate if you want to hear from us on anything.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We'll see you next time.